Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a show where I discuss the political news of the day and my analysis and provide analysis in a way you can understand. Well, we are we are just about a week away from the election, a little bit more. Hard to believe that the time has flown by. So, as you can see from the title, we're going to be talking about a very real scenario where Donald Trump could lose the election but still become president. And I'll go into that in a little bit, but first I want to provide a very quick update about the national picture because it has changed quite a bit since we last had the last episode was unplanned. The last regularly scheduled episode. There, according to a New York Times and CNN poll, which is a very highly rated poll, they are now Trump and Kamala Harris are now tied, and according to Real Clear Politics, Harris's polling lead has vanished completely, which means that Donald Trump is now favored to be the next president of the United States. He is ahead in every swing state except for maybe New Hampshire. He's in every swing state ahead by a point in Pennsylvania, almost a point. He's ahead by half a point in Nevada. I believe he's ahead. He's way ahead in Ohio and Florida. That wasn't anticipated. That we knew that was going to happen. There was a poll that came out in New Hampshire. Well, he was still behind. He was behind by about 3.5%, but that's less than half the margin that Biden got 4 years ago. Yeah, I have Wisconsin here, 0.2%, Arizona, 1.5%, Nevada is 0.7%, Wisconsin is 0.2%. I'm going to mention that already. Michigan is 0.2%, Pennsylvania is 0.6%, North Carolina is 0.8%, and Georgia is 2.2%. So I would say that Trump is on track to win every swing state in the country, and I would put his chance between 50 and 60%. So that's your update for this week. I'll provide one more before the election next week. Now let's get on to the Politico article that I have here. And as I was reading through this, first of all, I see these articles all the time, at least headlines that are like this all the time. So when I first started reading it, I was like, all right, well, we'll see what this has to say. But I was reading through it and I was thinking there is a very real chance that this could happen. So the very first step would be before the election. That would be sowing distrust about the results, which has already begun. And that would be leading up to it, just like he did in 2020. Then we get to after the election, say Harris wins in the official count. She wins enough to win. If it's a narrow victory, that's particularly where this is going to be a problem. If it's a big victory, it would be more difficult. Now, you'd start on the local level. You would pressure county and state elections and boards to refuse to certify election results, like he did 4 years ago. So you would do that in Georgia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Wisconsin. You would make it more difficult to certify the election results. You would drag it out as long as you possibly can. So eventually they will need to certify. And by the way, if they choose not to, that would go to the courts. And at any time during this process, they could go to the courts. This would be assuming the courts are unable or unwilling to intervene. And like in this article here, the Pennsylvania Secretary of State Al Schmidt said he would immediately take them to court if they attempted to delay certification in the local elections and local election boards. So this, as I said, this has to assume that lawsuits do not work. Then we would get to mid-December, and we would need to convince Republican state legislatures to appoint alternative electives to send to Congress. And the idea of the first step is now it's unclear who has actually won. And since Republicans control the chamber in every swing state in the country except Michigan, this could actually be a very realistic scenario. In Pennsylvania, our legislature takes their new seats on December 1st, right in between this process, but these swing states control basically these swing states control the whole process, as we already know. And the Constitution empowers state legislatures to deliver the electoral votes in their state for whatever way they choose. And the swing state has never, and a safe state, has never gone against what their voters have chosen, but it is certainly possible in this case. Trump would need to do that. It'd be very difficult. I think it'd be very unlikely, but it is definitely not a 0% chance of happening. Republicans in Wisconsin have said there's no way they're going to do that. We'll have to see. They may soften as the pressure campaign builds up, if that's what ends up happening. Then you get to where the Electoral College meets. They meet in the week before Christmas. And the governors, by the way, they will also send their own certified election results. So you will get to the point where the Electoral College will have two different slates of electors in this scenario. And the Electoral College would meet. They would need to decide. And by this point, the result would be in complete disarray. We'd have the official result, but it would be very, very confusing and politically dangerous for everyone involved. And hopefully they're able to keep the security up and make sure that this is not we don't have a January 6 type event when the Electoral College meets in late December. And then if Trump wants a path to overturn the actual election, it all leads to January 6th, 2025, where just like in 2021, the House and Senate need to meet to fulfill their constitutional requirement and do that right after the new Congress takes office. Of course, at this current time, we don't know who is going to be in control of Congress. At this point, Republican control of the Senate is basically guaranteed. I would say, since they have a small lead in the generic ballot, it is very small within the margin of error. It is possible that they could control the House by a similar margin that they have now. I'd say that is the most likely outcome. So say this happens. In 2021, Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, so they were able to dismiss that, and that's why Trump put so much pressure on Pence. But this time, if Mike Johnson or some other person is Speaker of the House, they could actually move forward with this. This is pretty unprecedented, and it's very difficult to see where this would go. But if they're able to deny enough states, and this is particularly why it's important that it needs to be a narrow margin. If it's a blowout, it could be a lot harder. But say Kamala wins 280 to 260, something like that. They just need to deny 40, 30 of our electoral votes, and then it goes to Congress. Congress needs to decide who the next president's going to be. Now, in the Senate, since I said Republicans are almost certain to take control, you would think that would mean J.D. Vance, which would become vice president. Yes, that is possible, but there are some moderate Republicans like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski who would not go along with this. And I know Susan Collins wouldn't go along with it because she helped change the system after the 2020 election. And then Lisa Murkowski is barely a Republican. The last few years she's talked about switching parties. So those two aren't going to go along with it, which means that Republicans at their current moment would need at least 52 seats. Actually, they need 53 because Kamala would still be the vice president. They would need 53 seats in order to make this happen, which is becoming increasingly likely. And I can explain more why later. So then, now it's completely deadlocked. It now needs to go to Congress for a vote. I already explained the Senate. In the House of Representatives, a lot of people think it's an overall vote where it's just a majority of votes. But that is not how it works. How it works is each state gets one vote. And that means California gets one vote. That means Wyoming gets one vote. Whoever controls the most state delegations wins. And at that point, right now, it's 26 to 22. Which would mean, and if that stays the same, which is likely for the reasons I explained earlier, then Trump would be elected president. He'd be elected president on January 6th, not on November the 5th. And there we go. That is the scenario where Trump becomes president. He'll take the oath of office on January the 20th after being defeated, and that is that. Now, will this actually happen? No, this is not actually going to happen. I can guarantee this. Because one, at this point, he's the most likely to win the election. If he wins the election, then this is all moot. Next, he needs to lose the election by a narrow margin for the reasons I explained earlier. That is also unlikely. Whoever wins the election is going to probably win the majority of swing states. It's probably going to be a similar margin to what we saw in 2016 and 2020. It's going to be something like that, where it's going to be around 300 electoral votes. Could be thinner, but that would be the best guess, according to experts, because all the swing states tend to swing in the same direction. Usually you don't get swing states that swing you might get one or two, but you usually don't get swing states that swing in opposite directions. That's very uncommon. And then they would need to win control of Congress decently. Like, they would need a decent majority to overcome any rebels. And that is unlikely. They would need a decent landslide. And get this, if Kamala wins the White House legitimately, Democrats are likely to perform well in the House, which would mean that it would be more difficult to overturn the election. And same with the Senate. And then lastly, would state legislatures and would governors and would state legislatures and would governors be willing to go along with this? Maybe, but I get the feeling if Trump loses again, his grasp on the party is going to be pretty much evaporated. He is going to have a lot less political power than he did 4 years ago. So that's the good news if you're a supporter of democracy, if you're a Kamala supporter, or you just don't want to see our electoral institutions undermined. So that is that. And it's very, very scary when I was reading this. I can definitely link this article in the description so you could take a look at it. The big hole in the plan would be the courts would have to be completely, like, they'd have to either side with Republicans or they would have to stay out of it completely, which I think is unlikely. I think the Supreme Court, even with its current makeup, would reject any shenanigans, because I think in 2020 Trump took it to the Supreme Court and they turned him away. All right, now as I mentioned it earlier, let me mention the Senate. Pennsylvania has tightened. Bob Casey is now within a 2-point lead over his opponent. In Wisconsin, it looks like it is a complete tie. The polls have been narrowing. It is possible that the Republican will win there. Arizona, it still seems like the Democrat is going to win. That I would say that's likely Democratic. In Ohio, it is pretty close. I would say it's a toss-up. If Trump does well in Ohio, then that's going to be the end of Senator Brown. In Michigan, it's the polls have been a little all over the place, but it looks like the Republicans won't pick up that seat. But considering this is an open seat, this is the time to get it. If they're going to get it, they're going to get it now. In Nevada, the Republicans have improved a little bit, but not enough to make me think it'll be a toss-up. It looks like the Democrats are going to win that seat. And in Texas, Senator Cruz still has a decent lead over his opponent, so I would expect him to win as well. Alrighty. Well, that's a little bit of a shorter episode. Hopefully it's a little bit faster than I thought it was going to be. Hopefully you learned something. I know I definitely did. But going from here on out, we will have one more episode. I'm hoping to have somebody on the show with me next week, and that'll be the last episode before the election, and we'll go from there. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.